Welcome to The Cow Behind the Barn, a podcast exploring humanity, the world, the divine, as experienced and interpreted by an artist. I'm Kevin Caldwell, a co-founder of the Table Collective. Well, I've been exploring the nature of place in these episodes, and it all began with a simple question about myself. Where and when did I begin? And that took me to the quantum entanglement of everything and everyone, and to the reality that there are layers in all of it. Thinking still just about places, where we're conceived, where we're born, where did our earliest memories take place. Now, can I just say that language is a fascinating and revealing thing? I've just used two common ways of speaking, and for some reason, until this moment, I never thought of them the way I am now. Let me start from this one. Where we are conceived. Normally, when we refer to conceiving something, we mean a sort of mixture of I thought of this and I imagined this, an imaginative thinking process. I began to conceive of an album that would tell the story of how a locket and chain connected otherwise disconnected people to each other, for example. So, where was I conceived, imagined, thought of? Are we conceived in that way? If so, by whom or what and when and how? So the way the language is used allows a question, in a way, about the divine to sort of leak into the conversation, even if it's subconsciously. I'm going to resist that detour for now, but I'll come back to it. And then there's another turn of phrase. Where did our earliest memories take place? I know we use the phrase to mean where did they happen? But interesting, isn't it, in the light of quantum entanglement, to think about where our earliest memories took place, as in literally taking places into themselves, changing them. Doing so, of course, along with everyone else's memories and lives, through the history of a place, everything which took place or took the place there. Maybe to take place is to make place. And if we're entangled, of course, that place takes and makes us as well. The place my earliest memories took was not Phoenix, the place of my conception, because I don't remember that, nor Arcadia, where the hospital I was born in was located, nor any of the other cities in the greater Los Angeles area where I've been told my parents rented places in the early years. I don't remember those places. For me, it's Granada Hills. I'm told we arrived sometime in 1961. I would have been 3 years old, or nearly that, depending on what month we actually moved. My parents purchased a long rectangular house with a garage attached, forming an L shape. It was new construction, with no grass or bushes or trees at first. The outside walls were stucco, with sections created by thin wooden dividers running up and down, and the sections painted in alternating gray and dull pale green. I've seen pictures. It was very much like all of the new houses in the neighborhood. It was in that house, on that plot, in that city, that several lines of my psychic entanglement came together. The line beginning back in Phoenix, deeply entangled now with my parents, and a divorce which was already brewing, lines stretching back to Granada, Spain, after which Granada Hills was named. I want to start with the family that brought me there, and the house they brought me to. In that house was my room, which I remember as yellow, and in that house I had an imaginary friend named Jim Midnight. And in the grassless backyard was, for some reason, an old rowboat where I remember playing. I'm told, though I don't remember it myself, that on one occasion I jumped from the rowboat and turned back to my mother saying, "Don't worry, Mom, I won't get wet. I've got towels in my pockets." That brief event has taken on greater importance for me, as we'll see later. This is a poem which I wrote years later, a way of traveling back to that house in my memory, a poem I called This is Prayer.
This is prayer. There is a boy in a house lying silent, painted in sunlight from windows in a yellow room. It is nap time. a time for sleeping, a time arranged in keeping with an eye to his good and also to his mother's need. He is not sleeping. Lying on his side in the yellow room, face away from the door, his head full of stories. The man in black is Jim Midnight. That freckle is a gunshot wound. Towels in his pockets will keep him dry out in the raging sea. A world is alive inside the heart, inside the boy, inside the yellow room, whose back is to the door that opens to the gray house, the gray hallway leading to the gray rooms, the gray window where his father is a gray shadow against a pale light, the gray kitchen where a gray shape, his mother, is leaning against a gray stove, the gray and empty room where they watch TV in black and white in the deepening gray of the ending of the day. There are stories inside the boy, inside the yellow room, inside the gray house, inside the memories, inside the chambers, inside the heart, inside the body of a gray-headed man, whose graying hand is scratching out these words. It is 3 a.m. A time for sleeping. He is not sleeping. He is awake in this house, in this room, in this chair, in these drying bones, facing through this window towards an eastern sky, watching, waiting for the sun to paint all his rooms and stories with a warm and yellow light.
A young boy processing the impending explosion of his parents' marriage and the implosion of his world, and my attempts to metabolize it all. Then, through my imaginative world and the man in black and the towels in my pockets, and now sitting and waiting for yellow light and a healing dawn. The poem says there are stories inside a boy. I'll come back to what we might think of as the more personal threads in the story, but I know now what I did not know when I wrote the poem, that the story tells more than what happened inside a yellow room, inside a gray house, inside the memories, inside the chambers, inside the heart, inside the body of a gray-headed man. And a lot of what I know now, I know because I began this podcast, because I didn't know it before I began. Though looking back at older poems and songs and journals, I think in a way I may have always known. That room in that house on that plot was in Granada Hills. And so the story of the boy in the yellow room is entangled with the story of that place. Originally, the area was inhabited by the indigenous Tongva people, who lived in villages scattered throughout Southern California and who had relied for sustenance and medicine upon the very plants and animals which had presumably been cleared and chased away to make room for the housing developments in which I lived. Of course, between the Tongva and our arrival there was a lot of history. Spanish colonization in California began in the late 18th century, and much of the land in and around what would become Granada Hills became large parts of Spanish land grants. All of that was done away with as well as California was taken over and taken into the United States. In the 1920s, the Granada Hills region was subdivided and began its transformation from vast farmland into what I read some called a suburban paradise, though in my memories it was a bleak, gray, barren place. The area was initially named Granada after a city in Spain, with hills added later due to the community's rolling landscapes. So what about Spanish Granada? That city was located at the foot of the Sierra Nevada mountains, in an area settled in various waves by Iberians and Romans and Visigoths before becoming a major city in the Islamic period of Spain's history. For several hundred years, before Granada was conquered in 1492. Interestingly, the year, quote-unquote, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, according to the rhyme many of us learned in school, progressively transformed into a so-called Christian city over the course of the 16th century. Now, why go into all that? What does that have to do with me? I never lived there, My memories didn't take place in, nor take the place called Granada in Spain, but the history of Granada, the namesake of my Granada Hills, and my later interests and experiences in life, and my growing realization that quantum entanglement is not limited to space and time, has caused me to include Spanish Granada before I go back to Granada Hills and California. Why? Two things. First, the Sierra Nevadas. I'm sure this will come back later in some future episode or two, but I've been entangled with the California Sierras ever since my very first backpacking trip at the age of probably 12. Hundreds of miles, maybe thousands, weeks and weeks of my life. Trails, mountains, meadows, streams, vacations, backpacking with friends, with my daughters, with other family members, and many solo trips. The Sierras have a unique place in my soul, and maybe my soul has a place in them. I have pages and pages of journals as witness, at least, to their impact upon me and my worldview and my experience of life. So when I read that Spanish Granada was at the foothills of the Spanish Sierra Nevadas, it rang with more reverberations than a mere coincidence. How does an entanglement really work? Did a mere naming have such an impact? Or were some of the Spanish who settled in California perhaps from Spanish Granada? Did they carry the spirit of the Sierras with them? Was it sown like a seed into the ground where a house would be built and a boy would play? Would that boy breathe the dust into his lungs, and would that turn into a longing for the Sierras? Did that longing echo the nostalgic ache of a Spaniard from centuries before who in the evening would remember the Sierras of his youth? These are questions, and I suppose they're hunches. Secondly, though, there is also the Islamic history of Spanish Granada. I'm not sure how much to go into here. Much of this aspect of who I am belongs really in later episodes, but the headline version is this, that I have felt drawn to Muslims and to Islam and to the Quran in a deep way ever since I was 22, which is when I first met Muslims while doing college campus ministry as a young youth minister in Southern California. My understanding of Islam and Muhammad and the Quran, as well as my ways of seeing Christianity and Jesus in the Bible, have undergone radical changes since that first day. A process of change I could summarize as moving from conversion to my religion to no conversion to actually a hope for mutual conversion of myself and of all people, not in terms of religious conversion or transfer, but in terms of personal, communal transformation together. But for now, I'm interested in beginnings and in entanglements. Similar to my questions about naming Granada Hills and the Sierra Nevadas, I wonder, were some of the Spanish who settled in California from Spanish Granada? Did they carry the spirit of their region's Islamic past with them? Was it sown like a seed into the ground where a house would be built and a boy would play? Would that boy breathe the dust into his lungs, and would that turn into a sense of connection for me, the boy, alive inside of me, the man, years later, every time I met a Muslim? Did that echo like the heart chambers of a Spaniard from centuries before who, in the evening, would face Mecca and perform his prayers? And deeper, why this affinity I would feel especially for the young child Muhammad? Was that sympathy already there in the soil of Granada Hills, left by ancient predecessors awaiting my arrival like old fossils in the dust, waiting to be discovered? Did it find its way inside of me and become something like a factory setting in my hard drive? What about that boy, Muhammad, born around 570 in Mecca? His father died before he was born, his mother when he was 6. As a result, he was raised by committee, you could say, a wet nurse and foster mother among the Bedouins in the desert, a grandfather who died when Muhammad was 8, an uncle. What drew me to this person emotionally is the sense of dislocation, isolation, the compounding losses of anyone who cared for him. In addition, Muslims trace his genealogy back to Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and Ishmael also experienced, for very different reasons, dislocation and loss and rejection when his father sent him away. Did Muhammad feel rejection when he was sent to the Bedouins? Yes, it was a normal custom then, but a child doesn't know that. To me, it makes Muhammad's later sense of the divine nature all that more astonishing. Compassionate and merciful are the two most common names he would employ to describe God. And he once heard the divine voice say to him, "Did I not find you an orphan and take care of you?" In fact, let me present the full poem as it is in the Quran. I can't capture in English the rhyme and the rhythm of the Arabic, which is part of the power of it. But here is my attempt at a somewhat poetic version of my own in English. As surely as each new day unveils the brightness of the dawn, and as certain as the curtain of night returns in silence, your Creator has not abandoned you, nor has he rejected you. There is goodness waiting for you, and what is yet to come is better for you than what you know. Your Lord will provide for you and bring you into joyful abundance. Think back. Did he not find you an orphan, give you shelter? Did he not find you unsure of your way and lead you to your path? Did he not find you in need, give you what you needed, and even beyond? Keep this in your heart, and when you see an orphan, treat them with generosity. Don't be harsh if you turn away the beggar, and tell everyone about the generous bounty you have experienced. Now, I knew nothing about Spanish Granada, nor the Sierra Nevada mountains, nor Islam, nor an orphan named Muhammad when I arrived in Granada Hills at the age of 3. At the empty gray house on the bare dirt plot of ground. But was it all waiting for me there, entangled in the place? Did I take it into my psychic DNA? And later were my first friendships with the Sierras and with Muslims the conditions that would cause those dormant seeds to sprout and come to life? Is that why these have been such life-shaping dimensions of who I am? But wait, Kevin, I hear a voice in my head. Lots of people lived in Granada Hills, and they do now. They didn't all end up following the footsteps of John Muir into the Sierras or falling in love with the poetry of the Quran and going off to live in South Asia. So how does my life history as an individual, which I'm suggesting is in large part due to my psychic entanglement with places, end up so uniquely and distinctively unique to myself, while being so deeply cosmically entangled with so many other lives who've been entangled with the same places? If psychic entanglement is universal, cosmic in scale, all-encompassing, how and why are we also each so distinctive, so unique, so one of a kind? I'm not sure. I recognize and accept and want to welcome the beautiful and mysterious reality of all of that within myself and in all whom I meet. We are somehow mysteriously cosmic individuals, both individual and cosmic, all at once. In other words, we're not isolated individuals. That's the understanding of human nature presented by much of the Judeo-Christian Islamic religious heritage and by much of so-called Western philosophy and psychology. We're not individuals in the way we might normally assume. But neither are we fully defined by saying that we're all just expressions of an ultimately indistinguishable whole, which is how some popularized versions of so-called Eastern philosophy and religious tradition describe human nature. The views of the human self, as expressed in the teachings of the Buddha or the Bhagavad Gita, for example, are in fact much more complex than their popular renditions. My point here is just to say that psychic entanglement is my way of presenting my realization that we are in fact both cosmic and individual. We are cosmic individuals. I suppose I could say we are individually cosmic. By the way, when I add a so-called in my mention of Western or Eastern philosophy and religion, I do so because such labels reveal an assumption of a starting point. To say something is from the West or from the East assumes I'm standing at the center, west of me, east of me, me. So Buddha, though, was to the west of anything east of him. Is he Eastern or Western? And Descartes was to the east of everything to his west. So I don't know how else to refer to these things, so I usually will add the so-called. But I digress. So to come back to the thread of this discussion, as a cosmic entangled individual, I will get more personal here. I want to bring all this together as best I can in relation to my mother, who passed away in 2023, with whom my greatest memories of the house in Granada Hills are, of course, entwined. It's only more recently that I've been able to process the events in that house. My imaginary friend, Jim Midnight, the towels in my pockets, which, as you may or may not recall, I referenced briefly in my earlier poem. I've been able to see and feel, experience my mother's own entangled, lonely, threaded story. I give her grace, and I offer her compassion. One day I was driving down a highway when a phrase, wrapped in a melody, dropped into my mind out of nowhere, and it came into my heart, and it actually came out of my mouth, spontaneous, without any conscious crafting, seemingly from nowhere, that single phrase, "I've taken all the towels out of my pockets." Inspired by that, I worked on a song for the next few days, "Towels in My Pockets," which I hope to record and release soon. This is just a homemade recording.
Mother, in the gray light of the kitchen, the sleepy smell of morning in your clothes. Already at the age of 3, your anxious aching swallowed me. Even then I knew I was on my own. There was a shadow at the edges of my daydreams, dressed in black with his 6 guns and his spurs. Jim Midnight was my constant friend, from morning until dreams descend. Always with me, never said a word. That old rowboat in the dirt-skinned backyard waiting, you thought it was all just make-believe. I said, don't worry, I won't get wet. I've got towels stuffed in my pockets yet. Mother, those towels were more than real to me. And now after a lifetime of pretending that my own pockets could hold everything I need, I'm in that boat and I'm rowing back to the empty house and the man in black. A setting sun, evening skies bleeding. I've taken all the towels out of my pockets, laid them soaked and dripping at your feet. Throw myself over the side, content to drift now with the tide. I know now out there I'll find all I need. Mother, in that rowboat, do you hear me singing? I know now how much you also felt alone. Did you have something in your pockets too, you thought could save and rescue you? Did it break your heart that life drenched you to the bone? towels out of my pockets.
That song's a way of expressing the experience of entanglement that I believe in. By embracing psychic entanglement, I believe we become alive, more aware, more awake, and also that in so doing, we add something to the entanglement, contributing elements that can heal others, heal ourselves, perhaps, maybe affecting in a healing way the vast entanglement of the cosmos through the tiny winds of our souls. For me, to do so required going back to the house, the barren yard, the old rowboat, and it required I take the towels out of my pockets, all the ways that I've sought to protect myself, and to throw myself over the side out into the wide open ocean, which might be terrifying, but is where, adrift on the tides, I'll find all I need. Now, I think I have one more autobiographical reflection on place as I continue to press further into the question of where and when did I begin, and my exploration of the nature of the universe around us and where it came from. For that sheds light on where all our wheres are found and when. Until next time.